Hello, and welcome back to SamCentre. I'm your host, Sam. I just want to say, glasses, they're coming off for this one. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Over 100 views on my first ever video, and this has been something I've thought of since I was a child. I don't care if 10 people watch, if 2 people watch, or a million. To me, this has been my dream. I thank every single one of you for taking time out of your day to support me. Your likes, your comments, your subscription, all of it means the world to me. But most importantly, your time. Thank you for being here. We have a super exciting show today. We're going to talk NHL, NBA, CFL, and then highlight what's going on this Sunday, the UFC White House grounds. We're going to talk more about that Friday. Today's show, CFL Wednesday. Let's get into it. This is SamCentre. All right, fellas, glasses back on. We're done with the sentimental. Into the show. We're going to talk NHL for just a moment here, with the Vegas Golden Knights conceding home ice advantage back to the Carolina Hurricanes after dropping a 2-0 series lead that they had. The series is all tied up after 4 games, going back to Carolina, and to me that is key for the Hurricanes. Obviously, you don't feel great about losing 2 at home, but the games were close, and you did have a chance to win them both. And truthfully, the 2 games in Vegas, the same sort of way, right? They could have gone either way, but they didn't. They went to the Carolina Hurricanes, and now we have a tied series. Something that we have to talk about, and the reason this segment is titled Carter Fart is because Carter Hart is the first goaltender in history to give up 4 goals in each one of the team's first 4 Stanley Cup playoff games. And obviously, you know, the blame is going to be on him. A few bounces haven't gone his way, but it's kind of been the book on him, right? There were times where he overperformed in the Colorado series. There were times where he overperformed, frankly, in the whole playoffs and down the stretch. Maybe that last 10 or so games where Vegas, you know, things weren't looking great there. I texted my buddies and I said, what are we doing firing our coach right before the playoffs, right? In my head, this was going to be a recipe for disaster, and that's why I don't run an organization, right? There's no way where this should work, and it's working up into a point where, you know, they've run up against an extremely talented team in Carolina. Maybe the team that should win it and should all along be here and be in this position. You know, limiting Vegas's shots at home in such a crucial game, to me, is extremely impressive when you look at what the Carolina Hurricanes have done. You know, a couple lucky bounces, a few things go a different way in double overtime and a penalty, these sort of things, right? But they didn't, and they didn't go these sort of ways. They went towards the Hurricanes. What can you say about that team other than the fact that, you know, they have a lot of heart? Their coach won a Stanley Cup with them, beating my Edmonton Oilers. You know, they have a captain who's been with them for years in Stahl, and they have a young group of guys. You know, they seem to be a little shaky in goal, but it seems like both teams are. So, Carter Fart, maybe we'll owe you an apology by the time all this is said and done, but you know, there was a lot going on when the Oilers had their issues with Stuart Skinner in the finals, right? For the past 2 years, that was the Oilers' issue. We talked about goaltending. But at the end of the day, all of these teams, it seems like you just need to get hot at the right time, right? For basically the entire season, Colorado had a pretty good goaltending situation, and then we get into the playoffs, things fell apart for them. It kind of happens the same with Minnesota, where goaltending really carried them for a lot of that year, and then you got to the playoffs and it didn't happen. We're almost a reversal in Montreal, where someone plays extremely well, gets hot, and so something like that needs to happen for you. A lot of luck needs to go your way. I won't come down too hard on what they have going on in Carolina, or even on Carter Fart. I think he's just an easy guy to hate, obviously, with the situation surrounding him in Hockey Canada, which, you know, we won't get into. We'll talk Mike Babcock and the Oilers if we have to. We'll knock on wood that we don't have to, but it's looking that way. So Game 5, it's going to be crucial. Obviously, I think both teams have shown they can go in and win in the other team's barn. So now if we're talking 2-2, typically that's a swing game. That Game 5 whoever's going to win that, now they're kind of in the driver's seat. You have to go in and beat them twice, and you're going to have to beat them on their home ice as well, which obviously seems to be easy for both these teams. But we'll see. So maybe we'll see an under one of these days, right? The total seems to be set at 5.5, and then 10 goals get scored every game. So maybe we'll see 3-1. I said that last game though, and we didn't see it. So congratulations to the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, job's not done yet, but to go in there to be gritty against a pretty tough Golden Knights team, to me, it was just extremely impressive. And now we'll see. Game 5, we'll talk about it Friday there on SamCentre. Stay tuned for that. All right, now we're talking NBA Finals, and was I too harsh on the NBA? I don't know. To me, I don't like the fact that we're having these discussions about the referees in a finals. And it was the same thing in the semifinals when we were talking about Shea and talking about the guys over there at OKC. These flopping and if it's refereed differently, free throws and whatever else. And just so happened that I came on here Monday and I said to you all, watch out for how this will be refereed, because if the league wants to extend this, we're going to see it refereed differently than games 1 and 2. And according to the Knicks, after the game, Mike Brown, their head coach, came on the mic and said exactly that. He said, hey, we think there's no world where the Spurs should shoot 3 or 4 times as many free throws in the second half as we shot. And to some extent, I do get his point. In a perfect world, those free throw attempts should be fairly even. They shouldn't be 24-6 or 24-8 or whatever they ended up being. Maybe a 24-17, something like that. But then I dive deeper into what I saw, into the tape, because SamCentre, we do our tape study around here. That's what we do. And I saw something. I saw a Knicks team in the second half that got really stagnant on offense. And they played that way in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they got hot. Brunson made a lot of shots. But in the second half, it was Brunson will do a pick and roll with Karl Anthony Towns, and OG Anunoby is going to sit in the corner. And if that works, if the pick and the pop works for Brunson, he's going to take that shot. And he took that shot a lot. And I think you started to see that issue. The Spurs are young. They're a team that can fight for that whole game, the whole 48. Whereas the Knicks, you're relying a lot on Brunson, a lot on Towns, a lot on Anunoby. You have these other guys, but they don't create a lot of offense for you. What these other guys do, these Shamits and these other guys, they'll sit in the corner and they'll be ready to take the 3. They can drive, but that's not their game, right? If Wemby's inside, the Spurs want Shamit to drive. If Wemby is there, the Spurs want Brunson to drive. Right? That's kind of their game. And Brunson wasn't looking for Karl Anthony Towns in Game 3, at least in the second half. He still found OG. I'll give them credit there. OG had an incredible game. NBA champion. OG Anunoby, one of my favorites, as I say every week. But they just got stagnant, and it really showed. To me, the game was close. It ended in 4 points, obviously, but it didn't feel close. The Spurs said after the game that they felt there was opportunities where they could have pulled away if that dagger shot had just fallen. And I don't disagree. I saw Dylan Harper, I saw a lot of these guys brick 3-pointers, and then the Knicks would hit a 3, and you'd get that game towards 8 and 7 points, but it didn't feel that close. Whereas the Knicks up 2-0 in the series at home for the next 2 games in potentially the greatest atmosphere that we have in the NBA. We have a lot of great home courts, but Madison Square Garden is that place, right? That's what we're talking about. And so the narrative was, it's over. Down at halftime, the Spurs had blown a first quarter lead. Going into halftime, the youngest team in finals history, just an extremely young group of guys. It's done, right? They're not coming back from this. And then they did. And in credit to the Spurs, because Wemby and Castle and the guys on that team, they do not stop. They have a leader in Fox. They have a leader in Barnes. They have a lot of veterans on that team. But for the most part, the youngest starting 5 in NBA Finals history, they're only 22 years old. It's incredible what they're doing to go on the road, to take that game from the Knicks, and to really, in the second half, maybe expose some flaws. I don't doubt that guys like Brunson and the Knicks will come out quite strong in Game 4. And maybe we'll see. We'll see. I personally think Zach Zarba is going to be, refereeing, the head referee for Game 4. One of the best referees the NBA has. So I believe we won't have to talk about refereeing being a factor as of the next game. I think if the Knicks win that game, all bets are off. Tony Brothers, we're probably going to be calling you, my friend. But with Zach Zarba in there, I think we're finally going to have a game where we see which team is better. It's just going to be hard, physical basketball because Wemby and the Spurs shot a lot of free throws. And I don't necessarily think... I will say I think there was a few moments in the first half and maybe a couple plays inside where they got fouls on Brunson that, those could be targeted fouls. But the other part of it was the Spurs came out and played smarter. They came inside and they really did make sure that they were aggressive. Where what I'd see out of the Knicks was let's swing it around the perimeter. OG touches it, Cat touches it, Brunson, Hart. That's great. But all of you just swung it around the perimeter and there was no threat. So these defenders of the Spurs, they're young, they're fast, and they're athletic. They're long. It's everything that you want in a team. And the one thing that they're not good at is playing under pressure, and you didn't put pressure on them. So they came out there and they beat you in the second half. And now they have all the confidence in the world going into Game 4, thinking, hey, if we take this from you, we're going back home with all the momentum. And they're right. Now, what I'll say is it's one game. And it was refereed differently, I will say. I don't know if it was egregious, and I think the Knicks have a point, but I think they really do need to study their game in the second half, see where their offense was just stagnant. I mean, to me, with a team, let's say I'm not comparing Wemby to Shaquille O'Neal, but I'm going to for a minute. A team like a Shaquille O'Neal-led Lakers or a Shaquille O'Neal-led Heat, they're always going to lead in free throws because there's a disparity. You have a guy who is incredible on the inside at blocking shots. On the other side, nobody's as tall or as freakishly athletic as this guy. So your options are to foul him, and on the other side, he doesn't have to foul you. So I do get it from the Knicks' perspective. I do get the disparity in free throws, and I called it on SamCentre. I said to you, watch out. If they want to extend the series, maybe we'll see a disparity. But I think the Knicks are maybe going to blame that and not look at their own game and what was flawed, in my opinion. Relying on just guys to hit these contested three-point shots on the wing after you've kicked because Wemby's waiting inside, and the Spurs can switch, and they have some of these big power forwards in there who can switch on Cat, and they can switch on Brunson, and then OG is over there, who truthfully doesn't create a lot of his own offense most nights. He did in Game 3, and I really am a big fan of him as far as defense and three-point shooting, but if he's your third scoring option, I'm not super impressed with your offense. And I think we saw that in Game 3. Game 4 is going to be really interesting, and then obviously now we for sure have a Game 5. So really excited for this. All props to the Spurs to be one of the youngest starting fives in history and the youngest starting five in finals history, to go into Madison Square Garden, to be down at halftime, and to fight back and to win that game. I mean, listen, you can't count them out now. I think that line should be extremely close. I would say it's a pick-em going into Game 4. I do favor the Knicks just with that home court environment, and then I would favor the Spurs going back for that game in San Antonio. But let's see what happens. We'll break it all down afterwards. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the show. CFL Wednesday, our segment coming up. I'm very excited to talk. I have the standings right beside me. Let's get into it. On to the most important part of Wednesday's show, CFL Wednesdays. And for me, this is my favorite thing that I get to talk about. I love the UFC. I love professional sports in general, baseball, all of these different sports. But to me, the Canadian Football League is an area where not a lot of people maybe know how good our game is. It's an area where I can help grow the league by creating good content that you want to engage with. There'll be different on-the-field activities that I can film with permission from different teams. There'll be fan interviews. There'll be interviews with players. And then as well, different mini-series created to explain rule changes and the difference between our game and the American game. It's not that all of our players are Canadian, but all of our teams are. As you can see beside me, we have the East and the West standings after 1 week. And something that's a little bit unique about our game, maybe compared to the NFL, not every team played in week 1, and some of those teams who played in week 1 will not be playing in week 2. And I can already hear people booing in their heads and thinking, this is terrible. It's been 2 weeks. You don't need a bye. And I was on your side. For a minute there, I was thinking about it and I was chatting with my dad and I said, hey, I don't know if the Elks need a bye in week 2. But thinking about it a little bit farther, it's a long season that they play in the CFL. It's really important to have a lot of rest, and so that's why they've scheduled 2 bye weeks. The first bye week happens for each team within week 1 or 2. So the defending champion Saskatchewan Roughriders, along with the BC Lions and the Toronto Argonauts, all did not play in week 1, whereas in week 2, there'll be multiple teams such as the Edmonton Elks, the Calgary Stampeders, not playing. Whereas we're going to break down who is playing in week 2 of the CFL. Here are the standings beside me, and I want to say, we are in for a treat this week, fellas. All 3 games are the best home atmospheres you can have in the CFL, in my opinion, and by the opinion of the numbers. Obviously, we're going to get back with the double E, so just wait. But on Thursday night, we have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking on the Hamilton Ticats in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers home opener as they started week 1 on the road in Calgary, winning 30-28. And for Winnipeg, this is a massive game. This is an opportunity for you to prove to everyone across the league that you're back in CFL Grey Cup contention. For the Hamilton Ticats, this is equally as massive. You need to win this game to really get the respect of the fans back, because something maybe I'll rant about, power rankings after 1 week when not every team has played. How are you supposed to rank? Some of these teams were ranked and we haven't even seen them, and they had massive roster overhaul, which we'll talk about. And so I think, we need to temper our expectations. We haven't seen every team play yet, and it's still early. It's a long season. But for Hamilton, this is a big get-back week. You kind of let that game get away from you against Montreal. There was a great chance for you in overtime at home there, and then you threw the interception, and it kind of is what it is. Whereas now when we're talking going into Winnipeg, which is the most hostile environment in the CFL for opposing teams. The Winnipeg crowd is incredible. I actually had the numbers here that I pulled up, and they have every single one of their home games sold out as of last year. They average over 30,000 fans a game, and to me it's incredible. When you start to talk about their home atmosphere, everybody's going to be fired up. There's nothing to do in Winnipeg, and so now it's the middle of June. Everybody wants to watch the Bombers. They're 1-0, as you can see beside me. It's going to be a big game, and so Hamilton, I have no doubt that they'll be all right. They have an experienced quarterback. They have Bo Levi Mitchell. They have an experienced group of guys, so I'm not extremely worried about the atmosphere getting to them. But the place will be rocking, right? Winnipeg is going to sell out. They're going to have over 30,000 fans again. Thursday night football. I would tune into this game. My analysis of it is quite simple. I think Hamilton does have the offensive firepower to be a really dangerous regular season team. I talked about it in the opener. I'm not sold on the defense just yet. I do think they really do need to kind of gel as a unit a little bit more, where Winnipeg, I almost think the opposite. I think Winnipeg has the ability to be extremely good in those later season games, in the regular season when it matters, and in the playoffs, because they have a great ground game with Brady Oliveira, and they have an excellent coach, an experienced group of guys, but they're kind of all getting back. There was some changes, there was some overhaul in the offseason, and I really do think this is an opportunity for Hamilton to go in there and show, okay, week 1, that'll happen. Over a long season, you'll blow games. It was week 1. If they can go in there and they can put up a lot of points against Winnipeg, maybe get up early in the game, I think it's going to be tough for Winnipeg to really hang with that. I mean, we're going to see. We'll see what the weather's like. I think if all things considered, if the weather's fine, if the crowd is rocking, if that defense is going, if they can pick off Bo Levi a couple times, it could be an issue. I'm going to lean with the away team on this one. And Bombers fans, please don't come at me in the comments. I really do think that there's a really high potential for this Winnipeg team this year. I just see it maybe in the second half of the season. The same with the Stampeders, where I think it's going to take a little bit for these units to gel. Hey, 1-0 with the potential to go up 2-0. Make SamCentre eat his words. Thursday night football, baby. Hamilton at Winnipeg, the best home atmosphere in the CFL. Unless Riders fans will talk. But in the next game we're going to break down is Friday night in Montreal. And Montreal is another atmosphere that is incredible. I myself have never been, but they average about 22,000 fans a night, where their home field only fits about 23 to 24,000. So it really is a cool atmosphere. I've heard from fans that, the fans are really close to the players. The players get to walk out right in front of them. It's a quite intimate atmosphere there. Incredible organization, what they do over there. Davis Alexander and the Montreal Alouettes started 1-0 going into Winnipeg and beating them on the road, which we just talked about. Really, really important. Going to Hamilton and beating them on the road, which we just talked about. Really important now for Montreal to beat this Toronto team. The Argos are coming in. They are not expected to do much this year, but what I will say, depending on your views of Kelly as a human being, they're the quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts, and we all have our opinions there. He's a talented quarterback, and they're a talented group. They're a group that put up points on offense last year, despite not having that stability at the quarterback position. So, there's some overhaul, there's some changes in the coaching department. They lost a lot of defensive guys. They made some cuts in the offseason, frankly, that I wasn't a fan of. I think they lost some guys on defense that they couldn't have afforded to lose. And guys came to the Elks, guys went to other organizations. That's kind of what happens after you win a couple championships. A lot of these guys end up leaving for bigger contracts in other places. Montreal does have a lot of that continuity between seasons, so I'm going to lean the home team. I think Montreal is most likely a significant favorite in this game if you check the betting markets. Toronto could put up quite a good fight maybe in the first half, but I could see them, having a bit of a rough season, or at least taking into the second half of the season to gel. But Chad Kelly, he's a very talented quarterback. But I said it last week, and I'll say it again. If you bet against Davis Alexander in the regular season, you will lose. He's going to beat the Toronto Argonauts. He's going to start 2-0. And then Davis, the double E, is waiting for you June 20th at Commonwealth Stadium. We'll break that down next week. That will be his first regular season loss, calling it right now. However, I don't believe it will be here. So Montreal, all props to that organization. They were in the Grey Cup last year, ended up losing to the team we'll break down next in the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They should cruise, and if they do cruise and Hamilton ends up losing to Winnipeg, Montreal's already up 2-0, and then they come to Edmonton, which, frankly, being an unbiased CFL fan, is a winnable game for them. So you could be looking at 2-0, 3-0 would be their ideal. For Montreal, I think you'd be quite upset, though, if you do not at least finish 2-1 in these next two games, between Toronto and Edmonton, whatever that looks like. So Friday night football, tune in, Montreal versus Toronto, the classic rivalry. We're talking Leafs, Habs, we're talking French versus English. I don't want to get into it. I like poutine, but I'm not, I don't like the Maple Leafs. So maybe I'm gonna side with the Alouettes here. Here's what we'll say. Final game of the week, Saturday night football in Regina. And Regina, Riders fans probably will have some words for me for calling Winnipeg the best home atmosphere in the CFL, because they are definitely up there in contention for the best home atmosphere in all of the CFL. And to me, it's a no-brainer in this game when you start to look at talking about who the top organizations are. Saskatchewan overall number one. They have the reigning coach of the year. They have a roster still chalked with talent. They did suffer from a lot of the same issues that we broke down about Toronto, where we say, hey, you lose a lot of your guys once you win the championship, right? And so maybe not this year, maybe we'll see into the next couple, but the Malik Carneys. They lost some big names on their defensive line, in their secondary, on their wide receiver core, whether that was to free agency, injury, retirement, or personal issues that we will not get into for some players. The Rough Riders might have a bit of turnover. They still have a lot of stability at the quarterback position, the coach position. I was actually at the Coach of the Year ceremony, and all congratulations to the Saskatchewan Roughriders organization, who also won Organization of the Year at the ceremony. So that means that everything they do, top to bottom, is literally the best of the best. And as someone who works in game operations, as someone who's been around the league, I want to commend you, Saskatchewan. You're my dad's favorite team. You've always been on in my household. You've had a lot of really important moments in the CFL, and you've always done right by your fans. You've always done right by the CFL. So hats off to you, Saskatchewan. However, we're done with Sentimental Sammy. We're talking about Saturday night, and they take on the BC Lions. And now this BC Lions team, in my opinion, my unbiased opinion, because obviously the Elks are winning the Grey Cup, but the BC Lions might be the best team in all of the CFL, and I really do think they have a roster this year with all of the consistency and just the turnover in their roster being so insignificant compared to other teams. You know, they have the best QB in the league. They have a guy who I talked about on Monday. He represents our game extremely well. Nathan Rourke is a gunslinger. The guy is unafraid of anything coming at him. He will not be intimidated by Mosaic Stadium. He will not worry at all that he's facing the champs. This guy is built for pressure, and he shows it week after week. And I do think the Lions have an opportunity to go in week one against the champs when there's that championship hangover, when there's the pressure of performing for their ring ceremony, when there's all of these things around it. All of the turnover in the organization for the Rough Riders as far as their roster goes. I do think, obviously, they'll be ready to play. I see BC taking a close one on the road. I see it maybe being a 24-21 win for the BC Lions and starting off their season really strong. They're a team I'm a big fan of. And I don't really like orange. To me, one of the worst colorways. But their new jerseys are extremely nice. They're whiteout jerseys that they designed. Their locker rooms are extremely player-friendly. Another top-of-the-line organization, an organization that gets quite a few fans when they do host games as well. They're well-priced for the fans. I'm a big fan of the BC Lions as well. You know, these are two top-line organizations, two organizations that invest in their teams, they invest in their players, and they invest in the league. You know, you have MVP candidates all over the field. You have AJ Ouellette on the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and you have Nathan Rourke on the BC Lions. You know, you're going to see two of the most outstanding offensive players in our game. And there's guys on BC, some of those linebackers and defensive backs can absolutely fly. And the Riders are extremely well coached. So to me, it's a toss-up game as well. I think in my head, if I went neutral field without the championship, you know, without the championship night, without the absolute insanity that will be Regina, I would lean BC Lions. However, my dad watches these videos, and I'm not officially picking the BC Lions to go in there and beat the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I would say if you do any betting, if you do any predicting fantasy, anything like that, please do your own analysis. For me, these standings next to me are going to change quite a bit. You know, obviously the Elks are going to stay undefeated. That part will not change. But what you see in our league is an imbalance. And so we'll talk about this a little bit later. But there's 5 teams in the West, and there's 4 teams in the East. So knock on wood, we're hoping for potential expansion. To me, that would be extremely cool if we could get another East team. Ideally, 2 East teams and 1 West team if our league could handle that. But that was our Week 2 breakdown. I won't rant quite too much yet. What I will say, Friday's show, please tune in. We're going to be talking the UFC White House card. It's on Sunday. It's not on Saturday, so make sure you're watching. 7 fights, every single one of those fights worth watching. It's something I'm passionate about, as well as the CFL. If I had anything today that was completely brain dead and awful to listen to, please let me know in the comments down below. What I'll say is this to end the show, guys. We're getting better. The microphone quality, the production quality, all these things are only on the up, so why not subscribe? I'm handsome. I got sunglasses. I got a mustache. My shirt is unbuttoned. I'm putting in the effort. Let's go. CFL Wednesday. See you Friday for UFC Friday. I hope you all enjoy your week. SamCentre out.